Have you ever set aside some precious time that you have very little of to meditate or to find some peace and quiet, only to be interrupted by constant distractions, text, noises, full-blown chaos? Maybe your kids start fighting. Well, it's not a coincidence. Today, I'm going to reveal to you why your calm energy can unintentionally trigger others and how to protect your sacred space without guilt. So in this titled video, The Hidden Energetic Battle During Your Meditation Practice, I'm going to be sharing with you a lot of my own personal experiences. And within my stories, I'm going to weave through what I was able to determine was happening. So what inspired this particular video? Well, I definitely had another video written up, ready to go, but I received an email a couple of days ago from someone, and her question was so on point, and it was such a common question that I hear often, that I just knew that there would be many of you out there that might have a similar question or wonder why. And if you have your own stories, I would love for you to post those in the comment sections as we go along. So here's the email that I received, and so I won't tell the name of the person to protect their privacy, but the subject line was Blue Star of Miracles Meditation. So it was about the winter solstice that we had last week, and we sent out the recordings for those who weren't able to participate. So here she said, "It is almost 1 a.m. on December 27, 2024, and I have just finished the meditation. It was important to wait for a time of minimal interference. I was so looking forward to this meditation on December 21st. It was to be a special time just for me." Can any of you relate to this? What ended up happening is I had huge interference in the form of text, and loving each other's text from my mom first, and then from a group that I'm a part of. And they started right when Nancy was in the last moments of the introduction. They continued all the way through the whole call and ended shortly after the recording ended. This just happened before to me from this group and my mom, where they interfere, and to me it feels like they just want to destroy me. If you could provide some clarity as to their intentions and how I can move forward with this, my thought is to just take my name off the phone list first. Thank you very much. I just want to let you know, Nancy, I have great reverence for my soul leading me to you. Thank you for allowing others to be who they are and assisting with that. So the first thing I can be very straightforward with is no, they're not trying to destroy you. And second off, I just want to tell you, they don't have a conscious intention about what they're doing. It's very, very unconscious. So I'm going to share a few stories with you, quite a few actually, that's probably going to bring you a little peace of mind, and it's going to remind you and everyone else who's listening to this talk that they are not alone either. So I'm going to tell a few stories, and then I'm just going to weave in what is happening. So when I first started to meditate, I would set this time away. I knew that I wasn't working. I knew my husband was at work. The kids were probably watching a show, or maybe they were at their friend's house. And the moment that I would sit down and close my eyes and start to ground and get in that quiet space, the doorbell would ring. There would be some package to be delivered. Definitely friends would call. And I would always pick up the phone. This is before cell phones. So I would always pick up the phone because if my kids were at a friend's house, I didn't know if they needed something or if it was an emergency. Or if my kids were home, suddenly they would start fighting with each other. They'd start screaming, Mom, he's hitting me, or whatever. Like it happened every single time. Not once in a while, but every single time. I couldn't figure it out. So then I decided, all right, I'm going to go into my bedroom. I'm going to lock my bedroom door. I'm going to lock it, go in, sit in my chair. Well, if my kids couldn't see me or get my attention, you have to understand they were the ages of like 14 and 11. So it isn't like they were toddlers. Then suddenly they were like, Mom, where are you? No matter how much I told them that I needed some quiet time for a while, they'd start yelling and they'd want to know where I was. So this went on for quite a while. I had to get really, really clever. Sometimes I would take a chair. I had some woods in the back of my house, and I would drag a chair out in the woods, and they would still find me there. So as I developed over the years, I started to teach classes. So I teach classes now, and they're very much virtual. But at the time, we didn't have anything virtual like that available to us. There was nothing like Zoom or anything like that. And my kids, by this time, they were young adults. They were in their 20s. So that gives you an idea of how many years later this was. Every time I went to teach a class, my cell phone that I had, because now we had cell phones, they would start calling and calling, where are you? Why aren't you picking up the phone? And of course, I wanted to keep my phone on just in case there was an emergency. I wouldn't shut it off. I don't know why. But this would happen every single time. And it went on for years. And it isn't like my son and daughter lived near each other. They had their own places. They had their own friends. I would not teach for 2 months. And that one particular weekend where I would teach class, something energetically eventful would happen. Now, when I'm talking about it wasn't their intention, because often they didn't even know that I was teaching, but there was something energetic going on. And there was something energetic that was going on so much that one particular class, I was up in Canada teaching. I got a call that my daughter had been hit by a drunk driver who had run a red light, and she was walking. That she went to the emergency room. My father, who's a physician, drove there because I was up in Canada. She was fine. They were able to let her go home after just a few hours. But it was that energetic battle, that energetic interference that would happen every time I went to teach a class, a little less at this point when I went to meditate. What was happening was when I meditate and I ground and I start to release old stuck energy, my vibration would just start to rise little by little by little. I was energetically changing, and those that are around me that are very close to me could pick up that vibe, and they might try to resist that vibe. Maybe their own stuff started coming up. And when I would teach classes, if I had 15 or 20 people in the class, that's big, big energy. I'm making big shifts just right along with the students. And so those big shifts would cause big event shifts around my kids. So my daughter was fine, but what that taught me is that before I was going to meditate, I would give it a little healing. I would offer healing to the environment, and I would set an intention that nothing is going to cross my auric field, cross my boundaries. They weren't going to interfere at all, and that I wanted all of my family to be able to integrate any of the changes that I was making with ease and effortlessness. So the stories get better. So I will just let you know that. So in classes for a while, I had a particular helper that was helping me in the classes all the time. They would help me get the chairs set up. They would help me bring in the snacks. They would help me unfold the folding tables and get the tablecloths on and get the food all set out. But there was a pattern that I began to notice, that I would teach a little, I would answer questions, and then I would say, all right, now it's time for us to go into meditation so that you can have an experience with the lessons I've just taught you. And the moment, it's like I would guide the students to ground, I would guide them to bring up earth energy, they'd start to bring up bring down the cosmic energy and blend through their aura. There was always a particular time when the students were just about ready to drop into that deeper place. My helper would stand up, walk over to the snack table, and start cleaning it up. Like picking up trash, moving cups, maybe adding some more peanuts to the peanut bowl. Carrying dishes to the kitchen, the door kind of slamming back and forth. And I would just be like, what the heck? Like, what is it about this individual that has no concept that this entire room of people are meditating in the quiet? When we were at a meditation, it was a whole different story. And of course, you want to take advantage of that time when the students are meditating so that you can get everything ready for their next break. I totally get that. But this happened class after class after class. I began to notice. It was almost like I could anticipate it right when the students are really about ready to drop into a really deep state of inner peace, is when my helper would stand up and start cleaning the room and the tables. I mean, I can laugh about it now, but as I'm a really curious person, so I wanted to know what was happening. So I'm going to tell a couple of more stories before I do a little bit more explaining about what energetically happens at times. So there was a time that I lived in South Africa for a year, and I think this was in the year 2003, 2004. And Yvonne and I had moved, and it was a big place. It was about 25 acres. It was just outside of a small, well, it's not a small city. It's a little city called Pietermaritzburg, and it was right outside that city in a place called Albert Falls Dam. And we lived there on 25 acres. It was called Ikabazini, which means, I can't remember exactly what it means now, but it was a replica Zulu village. And so university students would come to study it, and elementary school students would come and they'd get to spend the night and things like that. And then we lived on the side where the staff lived. And the owners of the property also lived on the side where the staff lived. So there was a time when I would try to find a quiet place, because we were helping in the gardens, we were helping with the staff, we were helping to run errands, we might help with the cooking and things like that. So I would carve out some time in the morning, and it's 25 acres. Remember, it's beautiful, beautiful African gardens. And I found this place way off in the distance, sitting under a tree. And I'm sitting there and I have my eyes closed. I'm sitting on the ground. I'm sitting at the base of the tree to really get some grounding. And next thing you know, I hear the weed whacker going, and I look up, and one of the owners of the property was weed whacking the grass all around me, all the weeds. And I said, I'm meditating here. And it was like, well, this is Thursday, and every Thursday I clear the weeds and the tall grasses around this particular tree, which wasn't true because I lived with him. So I knew that that was not true. And later on, and this kept happening no matter, so I would move to a different spot. And next thing you know, we got to clean the floors here, or I've got to do the spring cleaning. And so finally one day I asked him, why is it, I'm really curious, whenever I go to meditate, you come around and start making a lot of noise? And he said, because it annoys me. It annoys me that there's a lot of work to be done and you're just sitting around doing nothing. And so it was like, well, at least he was honest. But it was, it was, it wasn't about that. It was more about the energy was shifting on the land, because I would ground and gold the land. I would do readings on the land. Of course, I was running my own energy. And what I knew was he couldn't tolerate the energy shifting very much. And he was throwing a fit, and he was a full-grown man. So there's another story that has to do with, I was staying with someone who let me stay at their house. I was going to teach a class. And they had two sons that had gone like a work release or something, or work exchange. They were going to be gone for a year in China. And it had been quite a few months. I want to say 6 months, but I'm not sure if I'm exaggerating that. So it would have been more like, I'll say 3 months. But they hadn't called home at all. Now, the mother knew that they lived in a remote area, but still, she said she would have thought she would have gotten an email, she would have gotten something. And again, this was still early enough on that cell phones they don't work in China. It's a whole different system there. So she was really starting to get worried. And so I was staying at her house. So I said, well, how about we do a little meditation together on it? I told her, I said, I find it almost predictable that if we start moving the energy around their communication, I bet they're going to call you. And it sounded far-fetched, but she joined me. We meditated on it. We gave it a healing. We sent messages out to China across the ethers, for the boys to call home. Now, you have to understand the boys didn't live near each other either. They would probably have been 2 provinces apart from each other. It'd be like one on one side of the United States and one on the other. The next day, guess who called her? Not just one son, but both sons. And so I share that story because it blew her mind, but I had witnessed things like this so often, I expected it to happen. I didn't expect it to happen that fast, and I didn't expect both boys to call. I thought at least one would call. She was amazed. So she had sat there for 3 or 6 months, wringing her hands, really worried, didn't know what to do, when a simple moving the energy got both boys to call. Okay. Now, are you ready for another story? So I've taken, I would say, about 10 groups with me to South Africa. Nope, we don't do South African trips anymore, but we did them for quite a while. And we had a fantastic time. But what I began to realize, what you have to understand about South Africa, it's just like, no, very few places in the world are like Africa, the continent of Africa, and then South Africa. When you go to stand on that earth there, it is so deeply grounding that it really pulls your spirit deep into your body. And if you've got anything on the inside here that hasn't seen the light of day for your lifetime, it's like the light of your soul is going to light it up, and you can easily get triggered without even knowing why. I did not realize this until the first couple times I took a group, and I thought, you'd have a couple people start to kind of wig out with the high frequency, high vibration. So others could really handle the vibration. They loved the frequency. But for others who were not used to the high vibration in South Africa, it could really bring up their stuff. And it wasn't like they liked it very much. They couldn't stop it. There was one woman, I wanted to put her on a plane, take her to the airport because her behaviors were so outrageous. And she was a highly educated woman, but her behaviors were so outrageous that she was ruining the trip for everyone. But when we go out in the bush, there isn't much we can do about it. So it was like her stuff was coming up. We had another woman on another trip who said I asked her the question. She said she's a regular meditator, that she likes to travel, and so she said all the right things. But there came a point on that trip where her behavior, the more we meditated, the more out of control she became. And like sometimes she'd, start eating chips right in the middle of the meditation, like anything to try to trigger everybody else. It was like if she was triggered, she wanted to trigger everybody else. And so there was one point where I really thought that if we meditated more, she was going to get triggered so much she might have a mental break. And I had to really slow the group down on our progression spiritually and energetically, because being in a mental hospital in South Africa is the last place on earth you want to be. And so we just kind of played it kind of low key the rest of the trip so that she could remain calm. So in the question that was asked, it was like, why were they calling me? Why were the children needing me? Or why was this happening? What was their intention? Were they trying to make life difficult for me? And it's like, no, it's like they can't manage it. They don't know sometimes why they're behaving the way they are. I have literally had someone say, I don't know why I'm acting like this. Something's wrong with me, but I don't know how to stop it. So what can happen is you can have a high frequency, and I made a video about this recently. But it can trigger other people. And what's happening is if you lower your vibration and your frequency, they feel better. You start to raise your frequency, they feel worse. You lower it, they feel better. Why do they feel better? Well, they feel better because their stuff's not coming up. It's like, I remember once I was doing a reading for someone, and the words that came through was, don't wake the sleeping dragon. So it's kind of like that. Don't wake the sleeping dragon. If you come in with a high vibe, you're all fun and games, you're having a great time, that's going to stir up the dragon, right? And it's like, you don't want it to raise its fierce, ugly head. And so, like I said, on that one trip, we all had to kind of calm it down. It wasn't a maximal trip for those others who had the potential to go to a high vibe, but we all could remember that we were there to learn. We were there to learn about them, about us, and about traveling together as a group. But what ended up happening, it was just, let's say if we had a group of 20 that traveled with us, we might only have like one or two, but it began we began to realize that at least one or two are going to have a hard time because they don't know what it's like when the vibe goes up, because they can keep their world pretty managed and controlled. So let's see. I'm trying to make sure. Oh, gosh. Okay, here we go. All right, I was living in, nope, I did live in Hawaii, but I was gone to visit a friend. We had lived on this friend's land for a year, so we hadn't seen him in a couple of years, so we went back to visit. And I meditate on a regular basis. And when I'm staying with someone, they think it's going to sound lovely to have somebody meditate in the house, but when you're constantly keeping the energy stirred up, it just doesn't work very well. That's like most times when I travel now, I like to just stay in a hotel because I don't want to make it too uncomfortable for someone else if I'm always shifting energy. It can be really annoying to some people. So my friend, so now I'm meditating every day in Hawaii. It's beautiful, having Kona coffee, having papaya and lime. I mean, it's wonderful. And the fragrance, the florals in the air. I'm sitting out there and meditating. And each day my friend's getting a little more annoyed and irritated. Like I could just tell little things were bothering him. I hadn't connected it with meditation. It was like, this is his sanctuary, right? He has it in a certain vibe. And here I was coming in and I was shifting the vibration and frequency without realizing that it was impacting him. And so Yvonne and I went out to dinner one night. When we got back, he had gone into our room and destroyed it. He just threw clothes around and all this stuff. It was like the next day we just packed up and left. But it was trying to find that quiet place. It was just too much. It was too much. He was always very busy on his property. He was very active. He was always building stuff. And so here it was, that we're trying to ground the property. We're just running our own energy. But we loved each other, crazy about each other, the best of friends, but we just couldn't stay together under one roof in that way. So why does this happen? So I've explained it a little bit, but when you are dropping into a deep state of calm, peace, with centered focus, some individuals maintain control through chaos. So if there's a lot of chaos around, and it's similar with if you had a chaotic childhood, a lot of having to stay on your toes, in childhood, always having to be hyper vigilant in childhood, always having to be, looking around and seeing if you were safe, you can carry that over into adulthood. And so it's almost like if things start to get too quiet in the household, let's say when you were a kid, it could feel unsafe or it could actually feel dangerous. It's like, okay, something's not right. It's too quiet. It's too calm in the house. And so it can trigger survival type mechanisms. So their intentions aren't hurtful or anything like that. I mean, there was a couple of situations like my friend who has since passed, both of these friends have passed, but when he said, I hate it when you're just sitting around meditating all the time. And so he was purposeful in weeding the garden. But for the most part, people do not know what's happening at a subconscious level that's rising to the surface. And you may not have the tools to deal with it. So, but should you stop and should you keep things calmed down? No. But what you can do, again, is be more intentional. Like you can say, I'm going to go into meditation, I'm going to be shifting energy, but my additional intention is that it will not interfere with anyone else's life around me, and that everyone will be able to integrate these new vibrations and frequencies in a way with ease and effortlessness. They'll easily be able to integrate it. So I do add that additional intention now, no matter where I go. My sister-in-law had the same issue with her kids and her husband. No matter how often she told them that she needed some quiet so that she could meditate, they always found that they needed something that couldn't wait. Eventually, she ended up, now this went on easily 6 to 9 months. I do remember her talking to me about it and said, I just don't know what to do. I will make sure that all their needs are met. I will make sure that they're all nice and calm. I will make sure that they've had their dinner or whatever it is. I'm going in to meditate, and then something would happen and they would need her and it couldn't wait. So she eventually ended up making a big sign that she would put on her bedroom door that would say, "Quiet, I am meditating." And so eventually they all learned not to interrupt her at the time. So I phoned one day to speak to her, and her daughter answered the phone. I think her daughter was only like 12 or 13 at the time. And she answered the phone and she said, "My mother is meditating and we're not allowed to disturb her for any reason." So for the person who wrote me, what I want you to understand in this situation, like with my sister-in-law, it took some time for her to reclaim her space. She had always been so easily, readily available to other people that she was having to learn how to back out of it again. And so you can say to your friends in your great group that you're in, you can say to your beautiful mother, any kids, any husbands or wives or friends, it's like, I'm really trying to learn how to build a habit to create some quiet time for me, and I'm not very good at setting those kind of boundaries. So if I say I'm meditating during this time, please don't interrupt, or I'm going to shut my phone off, or if I'm not answering you back right away, I might be meditating. And so you just kind of give people a heads up. So yeah, you can put up signs, but I always felt it worked really well. So like for me with my kids, I would say, I'm going to be teaching a class coming up this weekend. Is there anything that you could think of that you might need before that weekend? I would even call them the Friday and I say, hey, I'm going to start teaching on Saturday and Sunday. I cannot have any interruptions. Is there anything you can think of that you need? And those kind of things that helped. And then eventually they were so used to the frequency changes that changed often that it wasn't an issue anymore. Now, what if you're one of those who's on the opposite end that's watching this video, where someone's meditating or quiet or they're doing something spiritual and you can feel your stuff coming up and you're like, oh, I get irritated every time they do that, or why does she have to meditate so much, or why does he have to meditate? Why is he chanting like that? All of those things. I just want you to know and to remember that what's coming up for you is on the inside of you. It's not them, it's on the inside of you. And you can set the intention to listen to one of my grounding meditations or another meditation, or you can just set the intention to let go of that annoyance, that irritation, or maybe get quiet for yourself and ask yourself, what's getting triggered for me? Maybe my mom was never available. Maybe she was neglectful. Maybe she was always going out, and now every time you go to meditate, you completely go away, energetically. It can be so many different reasons. But we are moving in this year 2025. We're going to see a lot of this, maybe, as we are all accelerating in our growth. I always talk about, it might stir up the good, the bad, and the ugly. But if we can just look around at each other and remember that we are all in the same river of life together, and we all swim differently, and some are loners and some like to swim in a group. Just know that we're doing the best that we can do. So back to the original question. Could you provide some clarity as to their intentions and how I can move forward with this? I hope that I've given you enough to work with. Know that it's not going away. The more you start to focus on yourself, the more you may find to get that kickback. But eventually, everything calms down. Because why? Because when you heal, they heal. And when they heal, you heal. So you keep focusing on you. You let them focus on them. But if they cross over into your backyard, you have, and what I mean by that is they're making a lot of noise when you ask them to be quiet. You do get to set boundaries around that. And make a sign. Or have a response call on your phone saying, I'm on silence right now. Or what is it? I'm not answering my phone. It gives you that message. So anyway, that was a long talk and a lot of stories. I would love to hear if you have your stories, because I know you do. If you've been doing spiritual work for a while or you've just started, I know you've got some really funny stories and maybe not so funny. So I would love to hear all about them. All right, everyone, take good care, and I'll see you in the next video.